I am not a financial advisor. I work with the XX network. Economic prosperity is not so much a material problem. It is, first of all, an intellectual, spiritual, and moral problem.
So this increase of information due to financial transactions becomes a huge database that the bank and the banks can see for everybody involved and for other account holders and non-account holders, but each of us individually can only see our own transactions, right? So there's an asymmetry of information which derives into an asymmetry of power. I can only see my accounts and my information about my transactions, but the bank, this entity, can see the accounts, the information, the transactions of millions of other people. And if you think about this internationally, there are only very few correspondent banks around the world, and they have been especially grouped into the Wolfsburg Group, 13 largest correspondent banks in the world. They have the information for, billions of people, of legal entities, of corporations, and so on.
Andreas Ores, an Ecuadorian politician and former deputy minister of the Central Bank of Ecuador, is giving a presentation at the United Nations on the topic of data of money, blockchains, or surveillance.
And this is what I'm going to go into next. So you can imagine the scale of the data derived from each of our transactions. And the thing is, it's not stored in some imaginary cloud somewhere. The big providers of the data of money, so financial transactions, their data servers are not in each of our individual countries. I'm talking from the perspective of the global south. Visa, for example, has their data center exclusively in the US. Only very, very recently did they open another data center in Europe. But the entire world's transaction, so you may be in Singapore and making a purchase in Ethiopia, but the data center for where that transaction will be stored is in the United States.
All the financial data is hosted in the United States. The US government uses the Patriot Act to spy on financial data and everyone in the world.
2005, so a long time ago, a Canadian consumer that was buying medicinal marijuana in Canada, but using Visa, which is a United States company that stores their data in the United States, was concerned that they may be red flagged because they were doing something legal in Canada, paying legally, but would be illegal in the United States. So Canada started an inquiry into why the data of Canadian citizens using Canadian banking providers and purchasing in a Canadian business store the data in the United States, but that doesn't end there. Sure, maybe it's in a corporate data center, but the Patriot Act, the United States Patriot Act, allows the government to have direct access to the Visa data center for their purposes, national security purposes.
Laws vary from country to country, so what may be normal in one place could be forbidden in another. In this case, a US company was operating in Canada and doing something that was perfectly legal there, but they stopped because they were afraid of breaking US laws. This just goes to show that if you don't have economic freedom, you don't have true freedom.
A few years later, in the Snowden revelations, Der Spiegel, a German magazine, newspaper, published that the NSA, the National Security Agency of the United States, had direct access to the credit card networks and to the SWIFT international transfer network, okay? So the problem that we saw in the first slide, which is that banks have this asymmetry of information and therefore power over all of us, doesn't end there. It so happens that one government in the world can also tap into that information. I haven't heard of the Central Bank of Ethiopia tapping the Visa card networks, or the National Security Agency of Peru in Latin America having access to the SWIFT network. It is only one country that legally or illegally, through these back doors, and has access to the entire world's credit card transaction networks and international transfer transaction networks.
SWIFT is at the heart of the entire economy. The USA controls SWIFT and surveils all transactions running through it. If information and money are power, then the United States has access to all info and controls all money.
It is a global monopoly. It's SWIFT it's a private, it's a cooperative, but it's owned by banks, and it's established in Brussels. It works under European Union regulation. Its information is exclusively shared with the United States. Okay, so it's clearly a what you would call a digital colonialism institution, and with an additional level, which is that there's a money issue involved. Okay, now SWIFT used to be known before 2011 approximately as a neutral global public good, right? It was almost as good as the International Postal Service, right? So you would just send an email or send a letter and it would get there, right? It was an international protocol for sending information, just like email. Now, it's starting with the US influence over the European Union. SWIFT was threatened to be sanctioned if they didn't pull out Iran from the SWIFT system, and that's how it started. And most recently, after the Ukraine war against several institutions of the Russian Federation. But that's probably going to increase, not decrease, right? So they're weaponizing a global public good against different or specific entities when it was supposed to be a neutral institution. So what we need is a resilient design that allows for a international, a true global public good that can be governed, for example, in a multi-stakeholder framework, hopefully within the auspices of the United Nations, that can guarantee this neutrality, just like the International Postal Union, okay? Which guarantees that if you send a letter, even in the countries that are at war between each other, that protocol, physical protocol of sending a letter and arriving to the other place will occur. That is an issue more of politics than technology, but we can design in this international, truly existing framework of technology, the protocols for that to happen as well.
At an international level, decentralized technologies and crypto assets hold tremendous value. They provide a level of confidence that cannot be shaken. These protocols are built into code and software, which has no emotion and cannot be threatened. It's neutral by design.
And the evidence doesn't stop there. You can see the documents that were leaked by Snowden, where they explain with a lot of detail how they retain the bulking and transactional data and how they use it for intelligence purposes. In this case, they have access to data from financial institutions in the Middle East, Pakistan, Zimbabwe, and Kenya, and the entire credit card network from around the world. They use the lingo for this in the intelligence community is FININT, for financial intelligence. And they explain that, you know, with the software that the NSA developed and the GHCQ also developed with them, you can put in, you know, a phone number and then it links to your financial account data, or you can just put in your credit card number or even your traveler code and it reveals all of that information, okay?
Free societies have always thrived on economic freedom. When people are free to pursue their own economic goals, the economy expands and poverty falls. However, recent revelations about government surveillance have eroded trust in our institutions. The NSA and other government agencies have been caught spying on everyone without a regard for privacy or due process. This not only violates our rights, but it also undermines our economy. The reason the dollar is so strong and our economy is so vast is that we have allowed people to be free. But if the government continues to spy on us, that could change. We need to be careful that we don't destroy our own currency and economy in the name of security. We need digital privacy and it needs to be written into the code.
As you can see, these are documents from the NSA. The TrackFin databases have basically all of this information of not only citizens of the US, but the entire planets. Now, this didn't end there. A few months ago, actually, a bit more than a year ago, you had protests in Canada against some of the COVID policies organized by truckers. And in Canada, an emergency decree was issued, an executive order was issued that basically allowed for the freezing of the accounts of the protesters. So you can see the power that surveillance over the data of money can have over popular mobilization. Now, I'm not judging whether the reason to protest is correct or not, but ignore that for a second. The fact that they can freeze the accounts as a way of threatening mobilization of people is extremely dangerous, I think. And this is an analysis most recently published. This is actually this month by the Canadian Public Order Emergency Commission set by the Canadian Parliament, where they analyze how much they got to freeze, and it's the top two pink and orange rows there, flows. They were able to freeze basically most of their money that was destined via these crowdfunding campaigns to the protesters.
The introduction of politics into our money system has dire consequences. These are steps that have gone too far, and the powers that be that surveil and control our data and finances are destroying confidence. That's what money is. It's confidence. When confidence is destroyed, our money is destroyed.
But it doesn't end there. Now the technology is available so that you can also do surveillance on the blockchain, on the different kinds of cryptocurrencies, which are, of course, transparent and available on the blockchain. And for example, there's this private firm called Chainalysis, which you may have heard of, that specializes not only in macro analysis of the money that is moved around in blockchains and of the different cryptocurrencies, but they can do basically reverse engineering, and they can analyze with sophisticated tools, but which are not too difficult to arrive to, the degree of the movement of money within the blockchains as well. And this is the most recent revelation by the United States Senate, that it is not only the NSA that had access to the credit card in SWIFT and other networks, but also the Central Intelligence Agency. Now, this is a huge power asymmetry, where sometimes people in the civil society have concerns over government surveillance, but here we have to make sure that we understand that it's not just any government or a small government or a local government that's doing surveillance. The asymmetry of information is such that it is basically one government, the US government, that has surveillance over the data of money of the entire planet's population. And this was basically sanctified by the European Union when they approved a special directive that allowed only that government to have access to the SWIFT database. Okay, so the European Union approved a specific legislation to allow that specific government to have access to a very powerful database, which is all of the international transactions in the world.
Blockchains are public, which means that every transaction is stored and viewable by anyone. However, data by itself is not very valuable. It's only when you pair data with complex algorithms that you could start to distill it into social profiles. This isn't science fiction. This is happening in real time. Right now, a hot topic is election rigging through social media and big data. Your opinion is shaped and formed by those who hold distilled data. This goes back to Joel Katz's philosophy on fees. Sometimes the best incentive is no incentive. If we move to a distributed ledger world, tremendous amounts of data will be harvested. The richest country will have information about everyone in the world. There will be a huge power imbalance between those who can finance supercomputers and advanced algorithms to distill the data and those that cannot. A privacy layer rids the transaction history completely. No incentive is the best incentive.
A very powerful database, which is all of the international transactions in the world. They haven't shared that database with the government in Africa or in Latin America or anywhere in the global south, but only with one government, which is the US. Now, this is very important. Now, how is this done? Well, because when you do a financial transaction, you have to attach some important data elements. And these data elements have been undergoing a process of standardization. And most recently, the ISO 20022 has been issued, where they basically require what kinds of variables, what kinds of data should be collected when a transaction is ordered, standardized, and then shared in these large platform systems that I have already explained. Now, this is important because there are standards and there's a standardization of surveillance. And that's also something we have to be concerned about and look at.
There's a lot of misinformation circulating about ISO and crypto. To be clear, ISO is a messaging standard. What this means is that there will be a set format for data. When all information is standardized, it will be much easier for artificial intelligence to study and draw conclusions from the data. The Shaanxi provincial government released new regulations on the management of data intended to come into force on January 1st, 2023. These regulations encourage enterprises to develop a data service industry in which data can be traded and exchanged.
This is also aided by a huge push, especially in the 21st century, especially since 2001, by this very unaccountable, undemocratic, and ineffective organism, which isn't even created by an international treaty, only an informal mechanism called the FATF, which is the Financial Action Task Force, which issues recommendations on what they're called anti-money laundering, terrorist financing regulations or standards. And they say that basically they are concerned that CBDCs, central bank digital currencies that are being promoted in national governments and central banks more recently may pose a risk if they resemble cash, because cash cannot be surveilled, right? So they're saying we have to really think about this if we want to allow anonymous transactions just like cash. Well, we think that privacy is a human right, and it's important that there is data protection and privacy. And the FATF does leave a little bit of ground saying, well, we still have to think about CBDCs. If they are going to resemble cash, if they're going to resemble physical bills and coins, how do we design it in such a way that it preserves those characteristics as well?
As we move into this technological revolution, privacy is more important than ever. With current events, it's becoming increasingly difficult to trust large institutions. Countries that value privacy and economic freedom will thrive, as history has shown us. Countries like Switzerland that offer private digital cash will have a thriving economy and a higher standard of living for all citizens. According to the Index of Economic Freedom, the United States is only the 24th most free country. If this trend continues, it will be difficult for all of us.
Suppose, as today, Bobby has a key to Bitcoin on her smartphone and Elliot has a key to ETH on his phone. How can they safely swap these coins just by communicating between the two phones? A technology that's already in use was an unobvious starting point. Two parties create a so-called joint custody key so that both parties must agree on every transfer made with it. A cryptographic way to build in rules governing such transfers surprisingly led to the breakthrough. Enter Liquidfinity, user-controlled direct transfers and trading between cryptocurrencies. Such joint custody with governing rules can be thought of as a vault. A vault is created by cryptographic messages sent between phones that define its rules. These rules, in turn, define how cryptocurrency, once transferred into a vault, can be transferred out. Overall, a swap between two phones proceeds in 3 steps. First, Bobby and Elliot's phones conduct a protocol to create the swap's two vaults, one for each cryptocurrency. Second, Bobby and Elliot each transfer the cryptocurrency they wish to swap into the respective vault. And third, a novel, gamified protocol between the phones ensures neither party fails to hand over its cryptocurrency. Only two rules need to be baked into the vaults. First is the refund safety rule. The BTC vault protects against Elliot not moving forward with the swap by allowing refund of BTC back to Bobby. Vaults predefine partial keys for this rule, such that any three of these partial keys can send the coin back to the phone that originally supplied the cryptocurrency. Each partial key is created, already encrypted, for a respective pseudonymous, properly incentivized but almost never contacted refund agent. Second is the swapping rule. The BTC vault defines transfer of its Bitcoin to Elliot. It uses just one matching key that is randomly hidden among a collection of non-matching keys, as we'll see. The two smartphones similarly create the ETH vault, which has the roles reversed. Elliot will be the beneficiary of any needed refund of the ETH, and Bobby the beneficiary of the swap. Once both vaults are in place, Bobby can safely transfer her Bitcoin to the BTC vault, as can Elliot transfer his ETH to its vault. If one phone funds, as it should, but the other phone does not fund, the phone that funded can simply initiate a refund. Typically, however, both parties fund their respective vaults. And then a probability game begins. For each round of this game, each phone is to specially encrypt the next potential matching key before sending it to the other phone. But because decrypting this special encryption is designed to take a relatively long time compared to the synchronized communication phone to phone, a phone cannot learn the other phone's potential key before it must send its own potential key. Thus, a phone that tries to cheat is revealed in that round. So unless it, in effect, bets with extreme luck on the single winning round, the cheating phone almost always loses everything, including, in some systems, a commitment fee. When, without cheating, the round with the matching keys is conducted, it is the execution of the swap. Bobby gets the ETH, and Elliot gets the Bitcoin.
Liquidfinity, you could swap assets for other assets without needing wrapped tokens or bridges. This model is more efficient and secure. It can eliminate the need for centralized exchanges. With the technology, peer-to-peer sales can happen between any asset. The code is going to be released soon, and there's no stopping it. This means that exchanging assets will become free. Centralized exchanges will no longer be able to control the market. The US will no longer be able to bully SWIFT. This code, these innovations are truly disrupting the system, and there's no going back. The amount of fees that centralized exchanges charge is absurd, and this technology eliminates that friction. The worst evils which mankind has ever had to endure were inflicted by bad governments. We are entering a world of smart cities, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and the Internet of Things. These technologies are extremely powerful, and it's necessary to have a layer of privacy. The XX network is a decentralized network that is public and open, yet all users' data is private. To learn more, go to xx.network. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please like, subscribe, and comment down below.